We're at a point where we're not just teaching computers to see images anymore. We're teaching them to understand them with a kind of nuance that feels, well, almost human. Today, we're diving into an AI that can look at a picture and shift its focus from an entire forest down to a single tree and then all the way down to one specific leaf, just like you can. So let's get into it.
Okay, before we get all technical, just take a look at this. What's the first thing your eye's drawn to? Is it the whole forest? Maybe one particular tree? Or do you zoom right in on a single leaf? That ability, that instant, unconscious shift in focus from the big picture to the tiniest detail, that's exactly what we're trying to teach AI to do.
All right, so the fancy term for all of this is image segmentation. The easiest way to think about it is like digitally cutting out every single object in a photo with a pair of scissors. You're grouping pixels into meaningful chunks, which makes the whole image way easier for a computer to analyze. This idea is the foundation for everything we're about to cover.
So, that brings us to the core of the issue, what researchers call the granularity problem. It all started with this amazing AI model that could supposedly segment anything. But as it turns out, anything often wasn't specific enough for what people actually needed. This is the Segment Anything model, or SAM for short. And look, it was a huge leap forward. You could throw pretty much any image at it, and it could find and draw a line around almost anything you could think of. Cars, people, dogs, you name it. A seriously powerful tool.
But, and this is a big but, here was the catch. SAM was often kind of vague. You'd point at a person, and it might select their entire body, or just their shirt, or maybe only their face. You never quite knew what you were going to get. So users were constantly having to go in and clean up the results by hand. And trying to teach it the difference between all those levels of detail would have required a mountain of hand-labeled data, which is just crazy expensive and takes forever.
And this really lays out the whole problem, right? On the left, you've got the old way, with SAM, a bit clunky, a little ambiguous. On the right, that's the dream, precise, intuitive control. Imagine just having a simple slider to adjust the level of detail, smoothly going from the whole person all the way down to a single button on their shirt. That's the control everybody wanted.
So, how do we get there? Well, this leads us to the solution. And I love this analogy. Think of it as a self-taught artist. This is where the new model, UnSAMv2, has its big aha moment. And the big idea here is just so clever. Instead of spoon-feeding the AI millions of images that humans have painstakingly labeled, what if it could just teach itself? That's the heart of what's called self-supervised learning. The AI basically creates its own study guide, figuring out the relationship between a whole car and just its tire, all on its own.
So how does it pull this off? Well, this self-teaching thing happens in two main stages. First, the AI generates what are called pseudo-labels. It looks at thousands of unlabeled pictures and automatically figures out which objects are parts of other bigger objects. Then, in stage 2, it uses that dataset it just made for itself to train and fine-tune its own model. It's literally teaching itself the very concept of detail. Let's dig into that divide and conquer strategy, because it's pretty brilliant. The AI starts by finding the big, obvious objects. Then it looks inside those objects to find their component parts. And it doesn't stop there. It keeps going deeper, looking for even finer details within those parts. But here's the real magic. It assigns every single piece it finds a score, from 0.1 to 1.0, creating this beautiful, smooth spectrum of detail.
And here's what's absolutely wild. To add this incredible new superpower, the model only needed to grow by 0.02%. That's the tiny number of new parameters, you can think of them as internal knobs and dials, that had to be added. This wasn't some massive, clunky overhaul. It was an incredibly efficient, really elegant upgrade.
And that efficiency story just keeps getting better. Remember the whole problem with needing tons of expensive hand-labeled data? Well, UnSAMv2 taught itself all of this using just 6,000 completely unlabeled images. Not millions, 6,000. In the world of AI, where data is almost always the biggest bottleneck, that is a massive, massive deal. Okay, so that's the theory. It all sounds great on paper, right? But how does it actually perform in the real world? Let's take a look at UnSAMv2 in action and see the proof. First up, interactive segmentation. This is exactly what we were talking about earlier. You can now point at something in a picture, and with a simple slider, you can dial in the exact level of detail you want. You can move seamlessly from the whole object down to its tiniest little piece. It's the precise, intuitive control we were hoping for. But it's not just for clicking on things one by one. You can also do what's called whole image segmentation. You can set a level of detail, let's say medium, and then tell the model to go find everything in the entire image that matches that description. It's like an automatic search for objects of a certain size or complexity.
And this incredible precision doesn't stop with still images. Nope, it extends right into video. You can pick out just the wheel of a moving car in the first frame, and UnSAMv2 will flawlessly track only the wheel as the car drives away, keeping that exact same level of detail. For anyone doing video editing or analysis, this is an absolute game changer.
Now for the numbers. This chart shows a key performance score. Basically, how good is the model at finding all the correct objects in a picture? Higher is better, simple as that. The old model, SAM2, scores a 49.6. UnSAMv2 jumps all the way to 68.3. That's not just a little improvement, that is a massive leap in performance. It shows a much deeper understanding of what's in the image.
And the story's exactly the same for interactive use. To get a really good selection, the number of clicks you need drops quite a bit, which just means it's way more efficient to use. But even more impressive, the accuracy on the very first click jumps from 58% to over 73%. It just gets it right more often on the first try.
Okay, so the numbers are great, they're super impressive, but this is way more than just a cool lab experiment. This huge leap in performance translates directly into some incredibly powerful real-world tools. Let's zoom out and talk about why this really matters.
I mean, the potential applications here are just huge. For scientists, this means being able to precisely analyze microscopic cell structures. For doctors, it could mean outlining the exact boundary of a tumor with pixel-perfect accuracy. For creative professionals, this is basically the next generation of Photoshop's magic wand tool, but on steroids. And for things like robots and drones, it gives them a much deeper, more nuanced understanding of all the objects in the world around them.
And that really brings us to the big takeaway here. We've just seen how an AI was able to teach itself to see the world with a whole new level of nuance, in a way that's much closer to how we do it. And it leaves you with this really powerful question. Now that we've given AI a more human-like sense of sight, what amazing things is it going to help us discover next?